Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Thursday, May 4th, 2023. If you'd like additional weather information on top of what I provide in this broadcast, you can go to weather.gov. That is the National Weather Service's online presence. It'll bring you to a map of the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii in the lower left. And if you point anywhere on this map, it'll pull up a forecast along with any relevant watches, warnings, or advisories for anywhere in the country. Across the lower 48 on this Thursday afternoon, we have severe weather from parts of far southern Oklahoma across Texas. We have red flag warnings for critical fire weather conditions, southeast Colorado, much of New Mexico. Frost advisory for the central Appalachians, portions of Pennsylvania and the Virginias. Further northwest, flood watches along areas of the Upper Peninsula and the Great Lakes, and then back here through the interior west, including the northern central Rockies, we have flood watches and various advisories and warnings as the result of snowmelt flooding from the snowpack there in the mountains. Well, here in Alaska, the coldest air continues to reside over the Chukchi Sea and along the northwest coast, but it is not nearly as cold as what it was a week or two ago. That Arctic air continues to modify a bit. Frost advisory has been issued for tonight for areas of the northern Panhandle and northeastern Gulf Coast. The full flower moon occurs this Friday morning, May 5th, and it looks like we'll finally start to see some warmer spring-like temperatures by mid-May. We still have a period of about another week of near to below normal temperatures across most of the state. Quick check here of FAA webcams this afternoon. Whales up there along the Bering Strait, some altocumulus clouds, mid-level clouds that kind of look like sheep fleece. 15 degrees. They had temperatures down around 10 above this morning. Ketchikan in the far southern Panhandle is enjoying some sunshine, just a few high clouds, and 54 degrees as of early this afternoon. But with some of the clearing that's going to take place here across the northern Panhandle and along the Gulf Coast, a frost advisory has been issued for 10 p.m. tonight through 7 a.m. Friday morning. So if you have any early season gardening and unprotected plants, you want to do something either to bring them in or cover them up if you have a good start there on your garden areas. Elsewhere in the state, no significant weather advisories. We continue to see a fair amount of cloud cover here and through the mainland, south central areas. Moisture feeds still coming up there from the Gulf. We have a couple areas of low pressure, one just south of Kodiak Island, another one here in the North Pacific. Also, low pressure generally running from eastern Russia on up into the Arctic Ocean. And a ridge of high pressure here through the lower Chukchi Sea and along northern parts of the state is in place, but it's not especially strong, just kind of a stable feature. Here's that low this afternoon just south of Kodiak Island with another low in the North Pacific and another low here south of the central Aleutians. These features by early Friday morning still sort of in place with a trough that extends back up here into the southwest interior. Along this trough, we'll continue to see scattered snow showers, and in the daytime, a mix of rain and snow showers continuing into Friday afternoon. And as far as these two lows, they just kind of are going to stay in this region and gradually weaken. A more substantial low will come across the central Aleutians on Sunday. The front ahead of that will work its way up into the Alaska Peninsula later Sunday and on Monday. The low will bottom out around 980 millibars and sit out over the lower central portion of the Bering Sea Sunday night into early Monday. In the meantime, low temperatures in most areas will stay above freezing through the central southern Panhandle, but areas in the northern Panhandle on back toward Yakutat here will see some areas of frost possible tonight, and certainly be colder. Copper River Basin in the 20s, near freezing Anchorage. Temperatures Friday afternoon are going to get back up upper 40s to near 50 up through Susitna Valley, and up here across the Panhandle, number of readings back into the 50s. Maybe not quite as cold there in the Panhandle come Saturday morning, and still some areas near or below freezing here, south central, especially away from the coast. And then temperatures once again Saturday afternoon, generally upper 40s to near 50 degrees south central, in areas of the Panhandle, lower 50s. Notice the air isn't quite as cold as it was a week or two ago along the Arctic coast and North Slope in the teens. Teens still along northern areas of the Seward Peninsula, still a bit below freezing most areas north of the Alaska Range. But temperatures Friday afternoon, with the help of some strong May sunshine, could be near 60 at Eagle, 56 at Fairbanks, but still in the 20s along the Arctic coast down into the Bering Strait. Saturday morning lows may stay a bit above freezing in Fairbanks. However, areas along the North Slope, Arctic coast, and western Seward Peninsula will still dip back down into the teens where the coldest air resides. And then temperatures Saturday afternoon should get back up into the 40s to lower 50s along the Yukon River, with perhaps as warm as 57, 58 there at Eagle. The southwest interior below freezing tonight, a bit above freezing out through the Aleutians. Friday afternoon highs upper 30s, lower 40s across the lower Yukon and Kuskokwim River basins, 43, 45 there, Dillingham, King Salmon. Upper 30s, near 40 there in the eastern Aleutians. Saturday morning lows back down below freezing across the southwest interior. And then daytime highs on Saturday back up into the upper 30s to some lower 40s, though maybe not quite a couple degrees cooler than what they were on Friday afternoon. And a quick check now of the temperature outlook. This is the National Weather Service's Climate Prediction Center for May 10th through the 14th prior to mid-month. Temperatures are still going to average above normal over the southwest. This has been a trend we've seen for some time now, and don't expect that to break right away, and that's centered along the southwest coast, especially the YK deltas into Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. Near normal temperatures through the center areas and around south central, especially there centered on Prince William Sound. A little above normal in the far northeast from the Yukon Flats, especially Arctic Village toward Kaktovik, and near normal temperatures anticipated there in through the Panhandle here as we get through May 10th and the 14th. By the time we look at precipitation may average above normal here across areas of the Gulf Coast in through the Panhandle from the east side of the Kenai and Prince William Sound through much of the Panhandle. Further north and west, near normal precipitation along north and west of the Alaska Range, with perhaps a little below normal for a change centered on the Seward Peninsula, again for the period May 10th through the 14th. But there are some indications the pattern may try to warm up considerably here as we get in and past mid-month. That could really bring us our first real surge of springtime and early summer-like temperatures. First along the Panhandle, spreading back up to the north and west as we head past the 15th.
Hi, I'm meteorologist Mike Ottenweller with the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, and I'm here to bring you this week's 2023 Alaska Breakup Outlook. As a reminder, always a good idea to be flood ready, especially this time of year when we move into breakup season here in early May. It's a great idea to start thinking about how to create your communication plan and your evacuation plan. This plan should be including of your family, your friends, and your pets. You also want to think about an emergency kit, some type of a first aid kit with your any prescription medication and any special food needs that you might have, something that you can grab quickly on your way out the door. It's also a good time to think about moving any vehicles up to higher ground. This is the time of year where flooding potential is a concern, and so any vehicles in low-lying areas could be at risk. Know the risk for your area. We're going to talk about the areas that are in a heightened risk area, but just in general, know if there's a potential ice jam in your area and if you are in a flood-prone area. And then be notified. How are you going to get information from your emergency managers? Do you have a NOAA weather radio? If you don't know, check out ready.gov. It's a great resource for finding out how to be prepared in case of emergency. So as you can see behind me here, this is Eagle as of today, and you can start to see some of the snow melting, some of the ice thinning just a little bit, and maybe even some of the darkening open water starting to show some signs of breakup. So let's talk about what we're going to be looking at today in terms of breakup. Of course, the three factors that we have considered in making the breakup projections: snowpack, how much water's in that snow and where's it going to go; the ice thickness and strength are critical; spring weather patterns. Our late April and early May temperatures are huge factors in how they control how fast that snow melts, the thermal condition of the ice and the integrity of that ice as it prepares to break up, and the type of breakup. Is it going to be a mechanical breakup that is much more dynamic and hazardous, or will it be a thermal breakup that is just generally slow and in place, smushing out of the ice? As we've talked about the last couple weeks, still an above average flood threat for most of Alaska this year. Hard to identify any specific site at a specific time, but in general, the flood threat due to the delayed breakup is higher than normal. So what do we have in terms of that snowpack and how much water is in that snowpack? This map is a percentage of how much water is in that snowpack. And as you can see here, it's generally normal to slightly above normal. We don't see numbers as high as we did last year at this time, where we were setting records, but generally normal to above normal, generally about 100 to 150% here from the central and the upper Yukon basins, about 150% out for the Kuskokwim Basin, and that runs on the same level as last year. And then for the Yukon territories, about 100 to 150% out there as well. The only spot that was really below normal was here west of the Parks Highway in the Chulitna Basin, where we actually see conditions either slightly below normal or right at normal, depending on the side of the highway. Here's a quick update, a little bit more of an updated graphic. This is just how much snow water is out there for this time of year. And the reason that this map shows higher percentages is because we've moved later in the year when we expect that snow to melt, but it hasn't melted due to those cold temperatures, so the percentages go up as we go into early May. So generally seeing things around 100 to 200%, but again, not a whole lot more snow to be concerned about. It's just later this time of year. In terms of our ice and where we have concerns on where things froze up, a couple spots that we are noticing along the upper Yukon, we had some jumbled ice reported near Eagle, so that's an area of concern. We also have a high freeze-up jam near Buckland, and that's another area that we're watching. And then along the Kuskokwim River near Aniak and Kalskag, that's where we also had reports of a freeze-up jam. And so those are three areas of concern. One spot that has lower than normal ice is McGrath, and so we see things a little bit thinner there, potential to break up a little bit easier and a little bit sooner. Think twice before you go on the ice. I don't think there's anything more that needs to be said there. If you were in Alaska this past month, you know that temperatures were below normal. This is how far below normal we were, generally about -10 to -15. If you got north of the Alaska range, about 5 degrees below normal if you were south. For the 11 to 17 May time frame, still expecting some more of that below normal here for southwest Alaska. Above normal conditions, though, are starting to move in towards the headwaters of the Yukon, so that will be an area that we target as a potential first breakup spot. Village threat potential, still the same as last week. Our target areas are still Buckland, Circle, Aniak, and Kalskag, and a lot of that is because of those reasons we talked about in terms of where their water was when it froze up this past part of the winter. So let's get now to our breakup timing. We can still see equal chances along the north slope for the Sag River area, but quite a bit late here for southwest Alaska, 6 to 9 days, and these numbers have really stayed on track from where they were last week, 5 to 7 days as you move towards the Tanana and the Yukon rivers, and so again, quite a bit late breakup. These numbers are all still looking to be on track as we head into the early part of May. Where our breakup has already started to occur, a couple spots of open water there along the Nenana and the Tanana River, and off into the Yukon territories as well, and maybe even just a little bit of open water that we see down by Nikolai. So our Yukon River at Dawson, here's what we look like. Started to see some open leads there. Off towards the Yukon River at Eagle. Here's the Yukon River at Eagle over a 5-day time lapse from April 27th through May 2nd. So again, starting to see the snow melt and starting to see some ice darkening, potentially even some open leads starting to occur there at Eagle along the Yukon. Here's a 5-day time lapse of the Tanana River at Fairbanks. And we'll loop that one more time, starting to see things slowly start to show some signs of the ice melting and definitely the snow melting, those footprints disappearing. Of course, everyone's favorite, the Nenana tripod, and you can see there the degradation of the ice in that area, so we are keeping a close eye on that at this time. Here's the Kuskokwim River at Nikolai, just a little bit of open water. This is an inverted color map from a satellite. So the red is vegetation, the white is snow or ice, and this little bit of open dark color here, Nikolai would be over here. So this is a critical area that we watch to start to time out when breakup might be occurring. Here comes the Kuskokwim River at Sleepmute, 5 days of time lapse there. I'll let that loop one more time. You can start to see even things in that area starting to show some signs of wear and tear on that ice, things weakening and slowly melting. Here's that same ice jam that we talked about last week. That's that ice jam from the Kalskag area where we had the ice freeze up in a jumbled fashion early in the winter. Here's our Squentna River, starting just to see some open leads there as well. And the Copper River at Glen Allen starting to slowly show some signs of opening, nothing extreme, but starting to see some of that stuff pop out of the satellite image there. And so this brings us to our last few images here where we can see the Yukon River at Galena as of today, and starting to see a little bit more darkening of the snow, darkening of the ice. If you need any more information, you can go to weather.gov/APRFC. You can check out our graphical breakup outlook maps at APRFC/flood potential, and we would love to have your observations. We need those to help us to know when the ice might break up, when it might go out, and when we might have a potential for an ice jam and a flood threat. So you can get in touch with us in all those different ways. We really appreciate hearing from our communities. We thank you for the observations that you've already sent in, and we look forward to working with you and keeping you safe for the rest of the flood season. Thanks for joining us today.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, it's now time to check your flight weather, and if you do have a flight planned early this weekend, Friday or on Saturday, we do anticipate areas of IFR conditions across the southwest interior, west of the Alaska Range up through the Kuskokwim River Basin, lower Yukon Valley, as a result of some areas of light snow or light snow rain mixed, becoming more showery as we go into the afternoon. Along the Arctic coast, also some IFR conditions there through the portions of the north slope. For Friday afternoon, we do see those IFR conditions improve, ceilings lifting. MVFR, though, prevails across the west side of the mainland, down across the Alaska Peninsula, and all the way out through the Aleutian Chain, also extending through the lower Gulf. For Saturday morning, IFR conditions redevelop along the north slope and along the Arctic coast. We have pockets of IFR along the east central interior, Alcan border, as well as in areas of the western interior, northwest of the Alaska Range, and then IFR conditions out over the northern Bering Sea, including parts of St. Lawrence and St. Matthew, and then out through the western Aleutians. And for Saturday afternoon, those IFR conditions improve a bit, but still a broad area of MVFR conditions expected across much of the mainland on Saturday afternoon. Still generally VFR across the Panhandle, but IFR conditions prevalent there out over the Gulf and along the Gulf Coast. Some IFR showing up out toward the far western Aleutians in response to an area of low pressure that'll impact that area later on in the weekend, especially by Sunday. In the meantime, Anaktuvik Pass, we expect VFR conditions on Friday across the central eastern Brooks Range. Same thing for Adigan Pass, VFR conditions. Further south and west along the western arm of the Alaska Range, Lake Clark and Merrill will see MVFR conditions on Friday, as will Rainy Pass. Up through the central Alaska Range, Windy Pass, VFR, and then going further east from there, Isabel and Mentasta Passes will see VFR conditions on Friday. And then as we drop across the Copper River Basin toward Tanita Pass, VFR conditions are anticipated there Friday, and along the northwestern Gulf Coast, MVFR conditions to start early Friday morning there at Portage Pass, but giving way to VFR conditions. And across the Panhandle, we expect generally VFR conditions, and up there in the far northern portion of the Panhandle, VFR expected at Chilkoot and White. Freezing levels at the surface on Friday morning run out across the north central Bering, dipping down to about St. Paul, and then come back in between Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays, up through the southwest interior toward the central Yukon Valley, dropping back down across the intercoastal mountains of the northern Gulf Coast, and then back up into northwestern Canada. Freezing levels of aloft are generally going to be above 2,000 feet along and south of the Yukon River and up to the Alaska Range, with highest levels associated with a warm ridge of high pressure. Freezing levels of aloft of 8 and 10,000 feet over northwestern and central Canada, and bumping upwards there from anywhere from 4, 6, 8,000 feet there across the Panhandle. The threat of icing, rather isolated, moderate icing anticipated. The main area of precipitation, there could be some scattered snow and mixed rain and snow showers, especially here in the southwestern interior. Anywhere above 3,000 feet, you could encounter some icing. Also an area up there above 2,000 feet along portions of the north slope. Low pressure down here south of the Aleutians above 5,000 feet. And then an area here where the air is warmer, some showers and butting up against the coastal mountains of British Columbia above 8,000 feet as we go through Friday afternoon. Jet stream level winds at 30,000 feet or 300 millibars, showing a anticyclonically curved jet chord, hence this big high pressure aloft from 100 to 120 knots right east of the Alcan border there over the Yukon. At 9,000 feet or 700 millibars, a belt of winds continue out there over northwestern Canada, 40 to 45 knots, but relatively quiet, maybe 35 knots southwesterly winds there in portions of the western and northwestern interior across the western half of the Brooks Range. And then at 3,000 feet, winds are relatively light across much of the mainland and Panhandle. We have a couple weak low pressure systems, trough of low pressure there out across northwestern Canada, British Columbia, and then one well south of the Gulf and south of the eastern Aleutians. Greatest threat for turbulence, we could see some isolated moderate turbulence surface to 6,000 feet there at the lower half entrance of Cook Inlet toward Lake Iliamna. Also out across the eastern Aleutians, surface to 4,000 feet, and then further west toward the western Aleutians, there could be some isolated moderate turbulence, surface to 3,000 feet.
Hola, stargazers. There are tons of bright dots in the sky. They're constantly changing, but here's the biggest this week and all month. If you hit the darkness this week after sunset and look west, the evening star Venus will be shining bright with Mars trailing behind it. And this week, Mars will be near Castor and Pollux in Gemini, and to its left will be Procyon in Canis Minor. As this month goes on, both Venus and Mars are going to move closer and closer together until Venus hits elongation at the beginning of June and they start to separate again. If you're an early riser, look to the east at 4 a.m. There you're going to see 4 stars that make the Great Square of Pegasus. To the right, you'll see a bright light. That is Saturn. A little over an hour later, you might be able to spot Jupiter rising in the glow of the sun. These are just some of the bright dots out there this May. If you want to know more, just ask. I'm Trace Dominguez. Keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And for the marine forecast for the south coast of the Panhandle, looking pretty good wind-wise, west-northwest breeze at 10 knots. And for the north coast, winds out of the west and northwest also, about 10 knots, seas running 6 feet. Northern inner channels, north winds 15 knots with 3-foot seas. Stevens Passage, northwesterlies at 10 knots. Clarence Strait, northwest winds at 10 knots with seas 2 feet. And for the day on Saturday, on the south coast, southeast winds now 10 to 15 knots with 7-foot seas. And for the north coast, central and north coast, east to southeast winds 10 knots with 6-foot seas. And for Lynn Canal, southeast winds on Saturday at 10 knots with 2-foot seas. Stevens Passage, southeast at 10. Clarence Strait, southeast at 10, seas 2 feet. Prince William Sound, Friday, northwesterlies at 15 with 2-foot seas. Variable winds 10 to 15 knots for the North Gulf Coast. East at 25 for the Barren Islands. East winds 20 knots for Kamishak Bay. Cook Inlet, north to northeast winds 10 to 15 knots, seas 2 to 3 feet. For Saturday, Cook Inlet, southwest at 10, northwest at 15 for Kamishak Bay. For the Barren Islands and the North Gulf Coast, winds will be light and variable, with seas running 3 to 4 feet. Prince William Sound, east wind 10 knots, seas at 2 feet. For Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait, northeast at 15, otherwise northwesterlies at 15, seas 4 to 5 feet. The Alaska Peninsula, north to northeast, 10 to 20 knots. Bristol Bay, west at 10 knots, seas 2 feet. And for Saturday, Bristol Bay, west at 20, seas 4 feet. North to northwest, 15 to 20 for the peninsula, seas 2 to 3 feet. Shelikof Strait, west at 15, and east side of Kodiak Island, northwest breeze, 15 knots, seas 4 feet. For the eastern Aleutians, north to northeast winds, 20 to 25 knots. Adak and Atka, north to northeast at 15. And for the western Aleutians, southeast winds, 20 to 30 knots, seas 4 to 9 feet. For Saturday, western Aleutians, south winds 25 knots, seas 9 to 11 feet. Adak and Atka, south winds 25 knots, seas 5 to 9 feet. For the eastern Aleutians, east to south winds 20 to 25 knots, 3 to 7 foot seas. For the southwest coast, north to northwest winds 15 knots, seas in ice-free waters 1 to 3 feet. Pribilof's variable wind 10 knots, seas 3 feet. Southwest 15 for St. Matthew Island, St. Lawrence Island, north at 15. And for Saturday, St. Lawrence Island, Yukon Delta coast, northwest 15, seas 2 to 3 feet. Kuskokwim Delta coast, northwest at 20, 2 foot seas. Pribilof, St. Matthew Island, south at 20. For the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, for Friday, west wind 10 knots, southeast at 10 for the central coast, south at 10 for the western coast, and for the Chukchi Sea, variable winds 5 to 10 knots. Saturday, Chukchi Sea, variable winds 5 to 10 knots, western Arctic coast, north at 10, light east wind at 10 knots for the central coast, and for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, looking at east winds at 15 to 20 knots. For tonight, look for dry conditions, much of interior Alaska, chance of some snow shower activity over the Kenai Peninsula, rain or snow shower chances Bristol Bay, a little bit better for Kodiak Island, and that extends along a trough up into the southwest interior to the lower Yukon River Valley and Yukon Delta. Bering Sea mostly dry with light winds, a few showers there, especially for Unamak Island to about Atka. And the Panhandle, mostly clear with light winds. Friday, again, maybe some isolated showers over the mountainous terrain there, the Alaska Range and the central interior, otherwise dry from the North Gulf Coast to the Arctic coast. Chance of showers over the Panhandle, chance of rain and snow showers over the western part of the state, dry in the Bering Sea. Next front pushing rain into the far western Aleutians. That pushes eastward, almost to Nikolsky, Saturday afternoon. Chance of showers in the interior and the Panhandle, dry in the west and north.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.